Good evening. Hello. My name is David Gauna. I am a Youth Advisory Board member to Alma, Association of Latinos, Latinas in Motivating Action. And right beside me, I have Julio Daniel Diaz. Say hi, Julio.
Hi.
Before we get started, I would like to show a couple things going on here. First off, Alma's info. If you, anything you hear on tonight's TV show that you would like to follow up on, please email us at info@almachicago.org or call us at 1-773-234-5591. You can also visit our webpage at almachicago.org, where we have a list of our programs, our Facebook and Twitter connects, as well as any events, photos, and resources. Awesome. So, let me first start off by saying that tonight's show is one of several shows going on in this year. Tonight's show is going to be focusing on the recent election results that had taken place, of course, with Donald Trump coming into office as President of the United States on January 20th. And what does that mean for our community, specifically the Latinx LGBTQ community? And I have Daniel here who's going to talk to us a little bit more about the immigration portion of that, and how does Donald Trump's administration and them coming into office is going to affect the Latinx LGBTQ immigrant undocumented community. But before we go into that, I would like to introduce Julio by just quickly reading a little bio of his. 1 second. Cool. So, Julio grew up in Pilsen on the south side of Chicago. He graduated from DePaul University, where he studied communications and political science. He interned at then Mayor Daley's office before joining the electoral campaign from Alaska to D.C. He also worked on congressional and senatorial races and worked on President Obama's re-election campaign in 2012. He currently works in the reproductive space advocating for access to healthcare and safe and legal abortion. Welcome, Julio.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So, Julio, well, first off, anything that you might want to say about yourself and the work that you do?
No, I think you covered pretty much everything. Again, I'm from the south side of Chicago. I'm happy to be here to talk about issues that are affecting and will affect our communities for the next couple of years.
We have a caller. Caller, go ahead.
Good evening, gentlemen. I don't think, if you're looking at Donald Trump immigration policy that he had proposed, it's not even practical. What he's talking about is creating a whole different agency, hiring more people, having detention centers. It's not going to work at all. Because if you look at in terms of the facts and evidence, how he's going to do it? It's not feasible in any type of way at all. And people have called him on his plan. So how are you going to make it work? You're going to have to spend money that's not really there for certain things. Can you respond to that?
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't catch the name, but thanks for calling.
I'm sorry. The name is Joe. It's not practical.
Thank you, Joe.
Nice to meet you, Joe. My name is Julio.
He's talking out the side of his mouth. Where is he going to get the money?
Yeah, so true. A lot of the things that he says may sound extreme and far-fetched. However, I like to remind folks that as of January 3rd,
20th.
well, that's when Congress gets sworn back in or comes back into session. January 20th is when the president gets sworn in every 4 years. I'd like to remind people that President Trump will have the House and the Senate at his disposal to advocate and push for legislation that will support the causes he campaigned on. And while...
And I made one other point. The majority of the Republican Party did not support the nominee. If I'm wrong about that, because a lot of things, you got to look at these different people from different states and who they represent. And a lot of those people may come back and vote those people out of office, because we do have, after a while, we call it the midterm election. It's like a safety valve. And they got to be very cautious, because they got to vote the way the people that they represent.
Right. Again, I think those are fair points. I would just like to point out that while we did see a list of Republican elected officials across the country denounce Trump, his candidacy, and statements throughout a 16-month campaign season, they now have the power to move forward with what they choose, right? The American people decided that whatever the campaign issues, they were willing to sacrifice whatever a minority of the population wanted.
I want to point out one little thing. You remember another Republican by the name of Mark Kirk? What happened to him?
Right. He was voted out of office.
Right. Because it depends on what state those U.S. senators from. The people, there's some people not going to back Trump policies. And if you ask me how he got in office, I can tell you how he got in office. No ifs or buts about it.
Right, and I think we'll be able to address some of these questions on tonight's show as we get.
I think I took up enough time. I don't think you have to worry about a lot of Trump's policies, because he talked a lot from out of his mouth, and it's going to come a time he's going to have to govern.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, caller. Thank you, Joe. Okay. Just to make a small comment on what we just heard, I think for me moving forward, and the importance of this subject and the importance of making sure that I was available to do this interview was how I think urgent it is, and how there's so many people who are confused on what does all of this mean. So I'm hoping today that we share the facts, as many facts as we can. I hope that today that we can provide an educational opportunity. But to also remind people we don't have all the answers, and that a lot of questions are going to keep on coming up. So please stick with us, and hopefully we cover a good amount of stuff. So Julio, I want to dive into just a little bit of what is your background? What is your background in terms of working with, immigration policies, or working on the ground on how does stuff like DACA impact our communities? How does stuff like ICE impact our communities? What's your knowledge?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been a part of is mainly working on electoral campaigns, electoral politics, from congressional to senatorial and presidential. And one of the main issues that got me involved in electoral politics was immigration reform, right? I specifically, it affects me directly because I come from undocumented parents. My siblings, a majority of them are and were undocumented at one point, and I still have younger siblings who are undocumented who will definitely be affected on January 20th come the Trump administration. But immigration in itself was one of the main reasons that got me involved in electoral politics, and why I continue to be a part of organizations that are able and willing to have serious conversations about immigration reform, regardless of whether it's reproductive rights or who we're voting for to get into office.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think you mentioned how this impacts you personally. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Can you talk about how does this impact you personally?
Yeah, I think one of the things one of the hot topics, current topics, is DACA, right? I have family members on DACA who are on the verge of losing those benefits on January 20th. What that means is that, so DACA is a 3-year agreement with the United States government that says if you pay a fee, for 3 years you can get a work permit and you will not be prosecuted or sought out as an undocumented person in this country and be deported. That's the agreement that you signed on to with the government. What happens on January 20th is a lot of things are unknown. One of the things is, will the Trump administration cut DACA on its first 100 days like they promised? Let's say if they do, what does that mean for our community? What that means is that the Homeland Security Secretary, once Donald Trump pulls the plug on DACA, the Secretary has the decision to say we could keep the work permit, or we can remove the work permit, or we can keep the other piece, which is our agencies like ICE will not seek you out in whatever city that you live in. It won't stand as it is now as soon as Donald Trump has ultimately the last say on it, but it's how the Secretary of Homeland Security decides to implement or not implement the DACA moving forward. Another aspect of that is that once Donald Trump pulls the plug on DACA, you can keep the permit for as long as the agreement is set for, right? So the agreement is for 3 years, and if you're 1 year in, by the time Donald Trump shuts it down, you can still have that permit for the remaining 2 years.
So each permit has an expiration date, correct?
Yes.
And so even if Donald Trump goes into office and says this is done, he can't pull anyone's permit until it expires, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. Okay, I get
Yes. However, the caveat there is that employers have the right to let you go because under contract, if the contract that they sign on to that says, I will hire this person as an employer, I will hire people with DACA, they have now the right to let you go because the terms that they have agreed to under DACA have now changed, right? Yeah. So you can have the permit for those next 2 years. That doesn't mean that you'll have an employment, right? Because the employer now can make the decision to either let you go or keep you at that point. And there's nothing that protects us from that.
Wow. So I'm trying to figure this out. So if somebody, even though the expiration date can be different and can be 2 years from January 20th, right? What does that mean in terms of, say I am undocumented, I do have my DACA card, but I get pulled over, and I get pulled over somewhere outside of Chicago, somewhere. Am I going to be deported?
So, unfortunately, at that point, again, it ends up being at the discretion of the Homeland Security Secretary that says, at this point, Trump says, I don't want DACA in place anymore. The Secretary says, this is what we will keep, or this is how we'll transition out of this system. You can keep the provision that says, under DACA, you will not be deported or sought out to be deported. But that doesn't mean that the Secretary will keep that.
Got you. Wow. Looks like we have a caller.
Good evening again, Jim. First of all, DACA is not that cheap. People, especially if you're a student here, you got to pay those fees if you want to stay here in this country. And I know some students that are going through that, and people think because a lot of jobs is being that immigrants are getting it or Hispanics are getting it. That is so untrue. We got to face the fact. The days of taking this box over here and walking it down 10 or 15 feet and putting it on a truck is over with. And people don't understand that we are in a new millennium, and you got to be willing to go to school to upgrade yourself. And we got a lot of those people that voted for Trump thinking somehow those days are going to come back. And lo and behold, that is gone.
I'm not quite
That's all I want to
sure.
Are you trying to ask a question, Joe?
No, what I'm saying is a lot of people blame immigrants that come here that that's the reason why Americans are not working. It is so untrue.
Correct.
That's unfair. And you talking about DACA, that's a very expensive. Especially if you're a student here, you got to pay those fees to stay here in this country, and it's not cheap. And they working their real end off and being productive members of society.
Got you. Awesome. Well, thank you for your comment, Joe. Appreciate it. Actually, I mean, he brings up a point where I think I read something where it's over 800,000 young people who are registered for DACA. And do these fees happen every year, or is it just a mandatory fee for the 3 years?
It is a one-time fee to apply for this, to be approved for DACA. And it's mainly young people because you had to have been on January 15, 2012, you had to have been 31 by that date, and you had to have been in the US for at least 5 years prior to that, right? So if you're 31 by then, like the majority of the people eligible for DACA are young people.
Got you. So Julio, I mean, there's still this attitude that exists where it's like, oh, immigrants are stealing our jobs. You know, immigrants are taking this, they're taking up our resources, this, and that. What would be, and I don't know if you're able to comment on this, but what would be the impact, say that Trump's administration really did cut all of this out, and Trump really did follow through on, you know, deportations and, you know, and he's really going for the mass amount. What would be an impact in sort of financially? I mean, immigrants make up a good amount of money for the U.S., correct? So what would be that impact? I don't know if you're able to comment on that, but
I mean, I don't know exact numbers, but we've had this conversation for years now, right? I remember 2003 when we were talking about immigration and the impact of shutting down a city when we Latinos and undocumented people, immigrants from different backgrounds, shut down cities across this country because the Bush administration was proposing bills that would consider us criminals, right? People showed up and showed their power when they questioned their viability, their economic power in this country. So we continue to have the same argument, the same debate where sometimes I don't understand where people get their facts, because it's undisputable facts that immigrants, an unknown number, in the millions, make a large part and contribute a very high percentage of the income and GDP for this country.
Awesome. Well, okay, thank you for that. So I wanted to talk to you also about, there has been numerous of cities across the U.S. who have came out and who have, you know, publicly voiced that we are going to be sanctuary cities for immigrants, for those who are illegal or undocumented. So can you talk to us a little bit more about what does it mean to live in a sanctuary city?
Yeah, a sanctuary city is a way for the city's governments, like Chicago is a sanctuary city. Mayor Rahm Emanuel has declared it a sanctuary city by not allowing government or city agencies to target people for their undocumented status or immigration status. That means that if you get pulled over by a cop for whatever reason, or if you get in trouble somewhere, or you come across a government agency in the city, they are not allowed to ask you for your immigration status to proceed with something that you're dealing with, right? Whether that's, again, dealing with cops or in court or whatnot. As city entities, they do not seek out information like that. And they won't prosecute you, they won't put you in jail. What that means is that federal agencies like ICE can actually deport you. They can actually perform raids in our city like they have in the past. A sanctuary city only means that the local government has vowed not to punish you for being undocumented, right? The federal government has never taken that stance. So that means that in the 40 cities who have declared 40 in the country, about 40 cities have declared sanctuary for undocumented people. The federal government can at any time walk in there and do their raids and incarcerate people for not being documented.
Wow.
So it doesn't necessarily protect us from much except from the local agencies.
Okay, got you. Wow. And the subject of immigration and, undocumented folks, especially in the Latinx community, I think you can't really ignore the whole, much of Trump's campaign where he kept on talking about the wall, right? He's going to build this huge wall and stuff like that. You have any comments on that?
No, I mean, one of the questions or comments that our caller Joe made was that, a lot of this is just rhetoric, campaign rhetoric, and it's not feasible. It wasn't feasible then. The election really was a blow for the Latinx community and for the undocumented community in this country, because not only does the president have the ultimate say on things, but this president specifically has now the House and the Senate to do whatever they want for the next 2 years, right? And I say 2 years because 2018 we have another round of elections where we make a decision to whether put back a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. But ultimately, everything that he promised is now feasible because he now has the House and the Senate.
Got you. So we talked a little. We shared a little bit of information. We shared a little bit about the facts. What do you suggest for young people our age, young people, who may be affected by this administration coming into office, whether personally or, through their own family, knowing that someone is going to have to deal with this administration coming into place and that specific category of being an undocumented immigrant. What do you suggest for young people to do at this point?
So, first and foremost, I think if you are a resident, sign up to become a citizen, right? Take your citizenship test, do it, register to vote, become an active member of your community. In general, though, again, get involved, right? Join your local organizations, talk to friends, call your elected officials who are currently in office to make sure they support policies that benefit not just the few, but also Latinx community, undocumented community, because we can talk about it on a broad national level, but politics is local, right? We can argue. We have a really difficult time here in Illinois with a Republican governor, but we also have a difficult time with a lot of things with our Democratic mayor in the city of Chicago. So politics is local, so getting involved, reaching out to local organizations, go to local meetings, go to, like...
Going back to real grassroots.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need to do. If you can volunteer, donate. If you cannot donate, show up to a rally, right?
Like even just like staying informed, I feel like it's just really urgently important at this moment. There's so much mixed information going around that, just being informed, I feel like staying up to date is really important. Well, thank you so much, Julio, for talking and joining us. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
Julio's a friend of Alma, so just to backtrack really quick. Once again, if you have any questions about tonight's show or about Alma, please email us at info@almachicago.org or call us at 773-234-5591. You may also visit our webpage. Our webpage offers numerous information. We also have a resource list as well, links, and we have all types of information for you to get more involved. Please follow us on Facebook as well. That's where that's where we post a lot of our information, our events. And speaking of events, we have an event coming up on January 13th at 7 p.m. Please join us. It's a huge fundraiser. We're hosting a salsa party, and I hope you can join us too. Right. We're hosting a salsa party. It's going to be great. It's going to be huge. There's going to be food. We have great deals going on. So please, please, please come join us and donate to Alma. Other than that, thank you so much, Julio, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And please tune in to our next episode and stay up to date with Alma. Thank you, and goodbye.